Spring is in the air. March Madness is right around the corner, but so is spring practice for college football.
All right, welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. I'm here with my co-host, Mashfik. I'm Aaron. Welcome to the show. Before we get started, please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the agenda for today. Is the SEC looking to succeed from the NCAA? We'll have more about that later. It's very strong.
You can't spell succeed. You can't spell secede without SEC.
Exactly that, right? And then we're also going to talk about some expectations on what some of the top teams are looking to accomplish this spring in spring practice.
Sure.
So yeah, let's jump right into it. The biggest off-field storyline in college sports this week. The SEC, they're done waiting around. So according to reporting from ESPN's Heather Dinich, league presidents and chancellors are meeting in Nashville because they're flat out fed up with the current NIL and transfer portal chaos. They're not making huge decisions yet, but they want a real framework in place before spring meetings in Destin. They're basically saying if Congress won't act, we will. So Greg Sankey, he admitted some folks inside the SEC have floated the idea of breaking away from the NCAA. Now, he doesn't support that, but he made it clear that the current system isn't sustainable. It's not going to last, right? Meanwhile, at the White House roundtable, President Trump suggested rolling college sports back into the pre-NIL era, entirely, according to the O'Bannon decision, a disgrace, right? So the tension's real, right? The SEC wants structure, the federal government is stalled, and the sport is stuck right now in the Wild West. Mash, my first question after, reading all this and kind of understanding the full summary, do you think the SEC has the juice to create its own rules without waiting on Congress?
So, your question is essentially, can they do this? Can they? Yes, I think they can. Will they? I haven't seen a good concept of what that would look like in terms of like how that interacts with the NCAA. Who do they play? Do they just go by their own rules? I think it's funny that all of this is happening after the Big Ten wins 3 championships, in a row, 3 different teams. So obviously the NIL, factor is playing a part in what we were used to seeing. But, all of that aside, can they do something? It would be nice if they would. Waiting around for the government to do something all the time, you're not going to make too much progress. So I think somebody should do something. If I'm looking at this from the SEC standpoint, if let's say they put up some NIL guardrails and the other conferences don't, wouldn't a student just want to go where essentially they can go make more money, where there's less rules, right? So I feel like trying to do something on your own and setting up more rules actually hurts your conference. So yeah, I would like to see some buy-in from some other conferences. The Big Ten would be great. If the SEC and Big Ten does it, I'm sure everybody else will fall in line. But I'm sure the Big Ten they're incentivized not to help out the SEC at the moment, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. Pretty nebulous at this time, just because I haven't seen any smarter minds come up with any like proof of concept on what that would look like just yet.
Yeah, of course. So if SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, if he says succeeding from the NCAA isn't the answer, what is the realistic path forward in your eyes?
I would like to see the clearinghouse that was set up with Deloitte. I would like to see that actually work, right? I don't know cur maybe we don't hear about all the deals that haven't gone through because of them and everything that has to go through there, but we keep seeing NIL numbers balloon every year, or at least we have in the last year since the clearinghouse has since NIL Go has been a thing. But so I haven't really seen the effects of it. It would be nice to see if that works. I I don't know what again. I don't know what a specific conference seceding away from the rest of the league looks like. I don't necessarily like it. I don't like the idea of it. It seems a little it seems weird to me. So I would just like to see that the guardrails that they kind of put up now work. I would like to see, you know, that NIL Go and all that sort of stuff kind of work itself out, and players play by the rules, and by players I mean, you know, donors and companies who are putting money towards these schools, not necessarily the players themselves. But I think the league is probably moving in the right direction with like one transfer portal window right now. We talked about it on the last episode where there will be some ramifications if coaches are tampering outside of that window, or at least after that window closes. So we're slowly getting there. It's unfortunate that it's taking multiple years to get this into a spot where, you know, the sport is what I would consider healthy.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Any additional thoughts on your end?
Yeah, no, it's just I mean, it's coming to the point of what I expected in these first 2 years of just, chaos. Um, the people who are, around some of the regulation of the league are wanting to bring, order to it, right? The people who, are running the different conferences. I'm sure other conferences are going to start having the same conversations. What can we do to regulate this? Because we can't, you know, waiting 2 or 3 years, it may be not soon enough, right? The game
Yep.
changes fast. It changes in a matter of months, weeks. So yeah, it's
Yep.
definitely a lot. Yep,
Cool. Well, yeah, that's that. We'll see what comes of that. Obviously, this is before even the SEC meets in Destin, Florida. So, you know, something might happen now. They'll get to Florida, maybe something else will happen. We'll just have to sit around and see what the decision is there.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, moving on to things that are more so in the near future, right? Things that we can get excited about now. Spring football. So we're going to talk about a couple teams here. Um, why we chose these specific teams, right? These are some of the most transitional teams in terms of identity, in terms of personnel change in the league. So it makes sense to cover somebody who we need to know what the expectation should be coming out of the other side of spring practice, right? What's going to become clearer after we see a spring game. So got any comments, Smash?
I was going to try to fit a pollen joke in there, but it's fine. We can stick to football.
Yep, yep, yep. Ah, okay.
What's the first team? What's the first team on our list?
First team, it's going to be the Auburn Tigers, right? So
Okay.
coming off of a 5-7 campaign in 2025, the pressure is definitely still on for new coach Alex Golich, right? He's entering his first spring as Auburn's head coach. And there are a couple things that we think he needs to focus on, but we narrowed it down to three. So here are the three main focus points, backed by the hard to ignore numbers the team put up last season. Uh, First is going to be, the Byron Brown era, right? That's beginning. It was probably one of the biggest splashes in Auburn's transfer portal recruiting in the season. They landed, the South Florida quarterback, and it's a good thing they did so, right? Last year's the Auburn Tigers offense was quite the roller coaster. They finished 74th nationally in scoring, averaged about 26.8 points per game, and they notably struggled in SEC play. So although they had a decent scoring average in points per game, they were the only team in conference play to fail to reach the 20-point mark in multiple games. So standing up to opponents at your same caliber of play, they're not able to get into that scoring range that usually leads to wins, right? Which is why we see the record of 5-7. Um, the thing to watch is going to be Byron Brown and him being such a dual threat nightmare, right? I think he fits in perfectly to this offense. At South Florida, he was known for his, his volume as he joined, an Auburn team that, allowed 30 sacks last season, right? So that's near the bottom of the FBS. Spring ball is going to be about seeing Brown's mobility and seeing if it can mask those protection issues, or seeing if the veteran line has, solidified and cleaned up those questionable, gaps they had that led to being ranked bottom in sacks allowed. Um, my question for you, Mash, do you think it'll be an easy transition for Byron Brown to move into this dominant conference?
I think Byron Brown was great at USF, but the a lot of his greatness comes from his mobility, right? He's not saying he's not going to be able to do that in the SEC, but I think you mentioned it. Auburn allowed 30 sacks last season, ranked near the bottom of the entire league. He's not going to have. I mean, yeah, he was at USF, but he probably had better protection there than he's going to have. If Auburn doesn't get better on the line, not to mention he's going to be facing much larger defensive linemen a couple weeks into the season once SEC play starts up. Not to say that he's bad at passing the ball. He's decent. I think what will help is, Alex Golish. He's known for his high tempo, wide choice kind of system where his wide receivers end up, the onus is on the wide receivers to be more of a playmaker, right? So that kind of takes a lot off his own shoulders. So I think we might see a different makeup of his playmaking abilities, maybe less on his feet, but it'll open up some stuff with his arms. And then once that's not there, then he kind of relies on his legs. So all I'm saying is we might see what made Byron Brown great again here at Auburn. That mix might be different from what we saw at USF. I think that's obviously going to be point number one, their main focus. How do we get the main quarterback installed and ready to go by the fall? Another point will be who do we pair with Brown? Brown has his legs, but that's not. We might talk about Oklahoma later today. John Mateer was the only running back on that team, and they only got so far last year. So I'm sure Auburn does not want to run into that same issue. Who do we pair up with him? Luckily, the running game was a pretty bright spot for Auburn last year. They averaged 1.31 rushing yards before contact, which doesn't sound great, but that ranks you 13th in the entire league. Jeremiah Cobb, he's coming back as a veteran leader, but the room is crowded with portal talent, which that's a good problem to have. So I think the rotation between Jeremiah Cobb, Nakai Davenport, he's a package deal with Byron Brown coming from USF, and Bryson Washington, he's coming from Baylor. So they have different levels of veteran experience, but they're coming from all different places, and they're all coming with talent and experience. Last year, Jeremiah Cobb, he finished with 700, a little over 700 rushing yards. So he was second in the SEC at one point. But the staff, I imagine, they want to see if Davenport can handle the SEC style of carrying of volume to keep Cobb fresh for those explosive plays. So all in all, I just want to say, who is going to be that running pair with the quarterback Byron Brown. I think that'll be the focus, finding a bell cow in that new backfield.
Fair. And then, if we flip to the other side of the ball, another thing they need to establish is, replacing that edge production, right? Defensively, Auburn was pretty good. They were actually quite stingy on defense in 2025. They only allowed about 20 points per game. That's 34th in the nation. Not bad at all. However, they lost significant production in their pass rush. So the focus is definitely going to be integrating, Deshaun Womack, a transfer from Ole Miss, Nate Johnson, the Missouri transfer, into the defense to maintain that, that high havoc rate. Another guy to keep your eye on is the sophomore Jared Smith, right? As a true freshman, he managed to get 2 sacks, limited action. With the primary rushers from last year gone, he's going to need to step up. And the transfers are going to have to replicate a unit that was, top tier in quick pressures last year. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I do want to mention one more player. So we talked about Byron Brown. We talked about him last year. He's going to be great this year, I'm sure. Just want to mention Tristan Taya. He's a Oregon State transfer. While Brown is the favorite, they have a weapon here with Tristan. He threw for 385 yards and 3 touchdowns in limited time last year, but apparently he is the dark horse that everyone in the facility is whispering about. Don't want to wish injury on anybody, but running quarterbacks a lot of times do get hurt. This guy could fill in an instant, if it gets to that point. But just want to mention that guy's name so he is on your radar. Um, Speaking of quarterback battles, let's go on to the next team, which is going to be Alabama, and this battle is going to be great this spring. Whatever intel we can get, I'm fiending for it because with Simpson gone, the competition for clash of styles and experience between redshirt junior Austin Mack and redshirt freshman Keelan Russell, that competition is heavy, and I can only imagine how fun spring practice is right now, getting to watch both of these guys coming off of equal footing, trying to figure out who is going to lead the Crimson Tide in Game 1 this fall. So I think what that focus will come down to is who can best operate the full, DeBoer, Ryan Grubb playbook. Austin Mack, he has a physical advantage. He's 6'6", 235 pounds. He's been in the system for multiple years. He followed DeBoer from Washington, but Keelan Russell, he is the former 5-star recruit with a higher, athletic ceiling. So those are just two things to look at right now. At the moment, I don't have any indication it's going to be one or the other. I imagine it might be. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on who it might be? Who did we see in the Rose Bowl? I think it was Austin Mack, right? He did pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, he had a pretty good, second half in the Rose Bowl when he had to come in and relieve Ty Simpson. So maybe that's uh, foreshadowing he could be the guy up. But again, I feel like it's fair game this spring, so
Yeah,
it's hard to say who's going to come out on top in that, right?
yeah,
Um, what I will say is, moving on to point number 2, they're going to have to replace, that wall that's going to protect whoever QB1 is, right? Rebuilding that offensive line. Alabama's offensive line, was its Achilles heel a little bit last season. They are essentially starting from scratch this year after basically losing the entire units in the NFL, including Caden Proctor, who we saw running the ball, catching passes, doing crazy
right.
stuff at the goal line, right? Um, so yeah, the focus is going to be building a group that features, 6 new transfers. So it's going to be building chemistry around them with O-line coach Adrian Klum. He's tasked with turning, collection of talented individuals into a unit, right? Um, it's going to be interesting. Going to have to watch for, players like transfer from Mississippi State, Javen James, right? He's going to be depended on to anchor down that left side.
Yeah. What
Mhm.
I hope to see from that offensive line is an increase, a better run game. I'll just put it that way. They weren't that good last year. Not a typical thing you see from Alabama. Hopefully, rebuilding the offensive line also helps in that department. I would like to go on the other side of the trench. Talking about the defensive line. Um, I imagine a focus will be in terms of identity, like being able to find havoc without having to send a full on blitz. They were elite against the pass last year, but Coach DeBoer has publicly stated that he wants more organic pressure this season. So, what does that kind of mean, right? So, in my mind, developing a 4-man rush that doesn't rely on exotic blitz packages to get home, right? The defensive coordinator, people were doing all types of dances. It was working, but that wastes time, that wastes energy. You wanna have that more natural, like you said, organic pressure. So I think the spotlight will be on edge rusher Jan Pierre. He did pretty good last year, but a lot of the focus will be on him to get better and get home. Essentially, he led the team in sacks as a sophomore in 2025, including a 3 sack kind of takeover against Tennessee. With the secondary, which was a great secondary with Alabama, losing a lot of key pieces. I imagine, this staff is going to be obsessed with the pressure rate that they can get from their front. They're going to need him to be a double-digit sack guy in 2026 in order to protect the limitations that their younger defensive backfield is going to have. So, yeah, we'll see on that one. Any other additional notes before we move on to the next team?
Yeah, you mentioned that running back position. They do have Daniel Hill returning. Apparently he's
That's right.
already trying to get more explosive out of the backfield. Apparently he's down like 8 pounds. He
Okay.
led the team in rushing touchdowns, even though the rushing game felt so non-existent, right? So
Yeah.
he is going to be one of those veteran guys that they may lean on to either step up or step out the way, right? So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how he's going to handle that adversity when we saw that was Alabama's weak point last year on offense.
For sure. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So moving on to our next team. We're going to talk about Nebraska as they enter, spring 2026 in a state of transition. After a 6-7 finish in the 2025 season that ended with, a loss in the Las Vegas Bowl to Utah, Matt Rule, he's made some aggressive moves. He hired Dana Holgerson. He was head coach at West Virginia and Houston at one point in time, and he hired offensive coordinator Rob Arich, a defensive coordinator.
He made another change this spring too. He's bringing back the spring game, the red and white spring game. I don't know
Oh,
if you remember, but he canceled it last year when all the teams were worried about cameras and people watching their spring stuff. Yeah, so he's bringing it back. So I'm sure people in Nebraska are excited about that. So that's good that he's bringing it back.
it's nice, 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 really nice. Um, yeah, I'm sure the fans in Nebraska are really worried, right? Like, what's gonna who's gonna be our quarterback, right? Life after Dylan Raiola. That is
Yeah.
the biggest storyline that Nebraska is facing right now. They got to figure out how to move and make that offense work without him. So before his season-ending injury against USC last November, he was elite. He was setting school records with 72.4 completion percentage, and he was throwing for 2,000 yards in just 9 games. So it's going to be really, really, really hard to replace him.
Yeah. What would you say? So the new quarterback is going to be Anthony Calandria from UNLV. What does he bring that's different from Raiola? Would you say?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've seen from him is just progressive growth from his freshman year to now, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Raiola he definitely had a good season last year, but we didn't see the immediate impact that we thought we were going to see from him being such a
Mhm.
prized recruit. But Anthony, Calandria, he really, really impressed me with Dan Mullen at UNLV last year, right? Like,
Yeah.
the guys seemed like they almost had a chance to stay undefeated and have a college football playoff bid. So
Yeah.
in watching some of those games, just because I was bought into the Dan Mullen lore story, uh, I saw this guy put up crazy numbers, right? Like, they were going head to head against Boise State, trying to outscore them by a lot of points, going against Navy, trying to outscore them. So, like, he's going to be a guy that I think can easily step in and sling it around if you need him to. He was the 2025 Mountain West Player of the Year. He brings a scramble drill element to him that Raiola's pocket style actually kind of lacked, right? Um, He's competing with returning sophomore TJ Lateef and the Virginia transfer Daniel Kalen, who originally, he started at Nebraska.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. So a stat to watch is going to have to be their sack rate. Last season, Nebraska's quarterbacks were sacked on 8.64% of their dropbacks. That's 117th in the FBS. So while Raiola was accurate, the line struggled to protect them, right? This new system is going to be designed to get the ball out faster. And this spring, is about seeing if, Calandria's mobility reduces that sack percentage that we saw last year.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Um, cool. I want to talk about more. You mentioned um Holgerson's kind of system here. I internally I wanted to ask myself, what does Holgerson's system bring to Nebraska exactly? Last year the offense was productive in spurts. Last year, but it lacked the it lacked explosive consistency. Consistently being explosive. So they ranked 86th in total yards per game, and I think the focus this year will be implementing air raid elements while maintaining a physical run game. So this spring, I imagine that Holgerson is going to be specifically focused on wide receivers extending plays. One stat I think that we can watch to see if this is actually being put into play. I think that'll be fourth down conversions, right? In 2025, Nebraska, they were terrible on fourth downs. They converted only a little under 35%, so they were 125th in the nation. They lacked a clutch offense that cost them, close games against Michigan, against Penn State. So Holgerson, he'll use these wide receivers to extend plays, extend drives. He's looking for fearless play calling and personnel that can execute in these kind of high leverage moments. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, for our third and final point for this team, switching to the other side of the ball, Nebraska's defense, they were the hero in 2025. They finished with a number 4 pass defense in the country, only allowed about 163 yards per game. Um, however, with, Rob Ulrich taking over the defensive coordinator duties, the scheme is going to probably shift, right? The focus is going to be similar to what we expect to see out of Alabama, and that's, having those organic pass rushers. You know, Even though the secondary is a lockdown unit, they struggle to create takeaways. They ranked 106 nationally in doing so. So they're going to want that, defense to bring that pressure without having to bring in more people on the blitz. Um, while the pass defense was legit, the rushing defense um needs some work. They, allowed 5.1 yards per carry, ranked 119th in opponent, yards per rush. So this spring, the staff is definitely going to try to prioritize the development of that interior defensive line, right, to ensure they're not a one-dimensional defense in 2026.
Excellent, excellent. Love to see it. Hopefully, they can make some noise in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have a fourth Big Ten champion in a row. That's different. Cool. Sounds good. So we're at our last team that we have high expectations for coming out of the spring. The first 3 teams we talked about all have different quarterbacks. This one will have the same quarterback, but I think so much of the offense will be different. So many more weapons will be around this guy that the identity is still in flux, in changing. And so that final team for today is going to be Oklahoma. I kind of foreshadowed it earlier. They're entering. So Oklahoma, they're entering spring 2026 with a massive tailwind, right? With a 10-3 campaign from last year. It saw them reach the first round of the playoff. But that 34-24 loss against Alabama highlighted exactly where Brent Venables needs to kind of tighten the screws around this program. So I think the focus will be John Mateer here. He is the bright light on this team. He is the reason they even made it as far as they did. Last season, I guess, you could say the offense was productive, but it lacked that elite explosiveness. They didn't have a running game. Their wide receivers, you knew exactly where the ball was going, or it was going to stay in John Mateer's hands. So it was very it was productive, like I said, but it was very you knew what they were going to do, predictable. So they ranked 79th nationally in scoring last year. So again, I think the focus it'll be refining Ben Arbuckle's high tempo system around Mateer's arm, and also integrating I'm very excited with the team, integrating NFL legend Jason Witten as the new tight ends coach to fix a room that had no consistency last year.
Mhm.
And, Aaron, I've always heard tight ends are a quarterback's best friend. So if the tight ends are doing well, John Mateer is going to have so much easier time, processing what the defense is showing them. I think a statistic to watch this year, last year, John Mateer had a little over a 60% completion rate. I think that a competent and a viable team for the postseason is going to look for a completion percentage closer to 68 to 70% to keep the chains moving, especially here in the SEC. So I think we're gonna see a lot of chemistry with the Virginia transfer Trell Harris, who was brought in to be that vertical threat that they lacked in large portions of the season last year, but especially in that playoff loss against Alabama.
Okay. Interesting. Good points. Um, I'm going to talk about the other side of the ball for point number two, and that's that defensive continuity, and then having that versus having havoc growth, right? Again, that defense for Oklahoma, they were the star in 2025. They finished seventh in the country in scoring defense. But to take it to the next step, they have to improve that offense if they want to make it to a national championship. They're also going to need more negative plays on defense, right? So the focus is going to be transitioning, that strength program under new director James Dobson to build more, twitch muscles and twitch speed on the edge, right? Specifically focus on PJ Adabawar and Taylor Wynn, becoming consistent game wreckers. The stats to watch is going to be um, the nine interceptions they recorded last season, right? So while the scoring defense was elite, Oklahoma's secondary accounted for 9 picks in 13 games. So very, very effective. Venables, he's pushing for a higher havoc rate. He wants more turnovers to create more opportunities for his offense to score. Emphasizing ball hawking drills for a unit led by, star safety Peyton Bowen.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, that was one of my favorite defenses to watch last year. If they're able to improve even more,
Mm-hmm.
that'll be great to watch for me, for sure on Saturdays. One other thing that I think will be a point of content, or not contention, but a point of focus, and how can we help John Mateer, right? That offensive line. I think one of the biggest gripes that we saw amongst Sooners fans last year was the line's inability to move people in the red zone and third down, like extending plays and stuff. I think the focus will be rebuilding like the right side of the line. They landed a couple of transfers for the tackle spot, for the guard spot. So we'll see if they're able to get that SEC push that they lacked. And again, like their third down conversion was pretty bad, 38.5%. They struggled to stay on the field for, it seemed like some games it was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. So that was like frustrating to watch, right? They ranked somewhere in the middle of the pack, nationally. So I think Brent Venables, I think he's already mentioned, he's pointed to short yard physicality being the number one priority for this new look O-line this spring. So with the inclusion of the Arkansas transfer and the Georgia Tech transfer, Peyton Joseph, we'll see if they can get that SEC push that they're looking for. So that's it on that. Any additional notes on Oklahoma or any other teams before we close out the episode?
Yeah. Oklahoma has an incoming transfer named Rocky Beers. So at that tight end position, check him out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky Beers. They have Hayden Hansen from Florida. So that tight end room is improved with proven commodities. They've got they're a future Hall of Famer coaching the tight ends.
Mhm.
John Mateer's going to have a lot of people to pass to, I think, and hopefully that offense will be as fun to watch as the defense, because that definitely was not the case last year.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Well, appreciate you guys watching another episode of First and Short. This was episode 52. We will see you guys next week. Thank you.